too much fun. Far too much fun on that one. Folks, how you doing? Welcome on board. It's Monday. We're doing the thing we do on Monday, which is rearrange the windows on our various screens so that I can actually look at the camera when I'm talking to you guys and hang out and play the guitar. Welcome on board. If you're new here, we do this every Monday. We hang out, we chat about the guitar. It is, beg your pardon, a good old time. And today, we are continuing sort of our discussion on chords and keys and all that good stuff with some chat about what key are we playing in when we play stuff. How do you find the key? How do you know what key something's in? How do you know what licks you can use, what notes you can play over a chord, over a progression, over a backing track? This has been inspired by comments from our Lick Library members and questions from our Lick Library members who have asked this at length. And by at length, what I mean is lots of people have asked this. This is something that Stu Shields receives a great many questions of in his Q&As, and we are going to try and answer this question for you. Maybe not once and for all, but definitely once today. But if you're new here, welcome on board. We do this every Monday, like I say. It is great to have you. If you're one of our returning streamers, it's great to have you too. I've got to show you a weird little quirk of the camera setup I'm dealing with here, because apparently this shirt is grey in this camera, and this shirt is blue in this camera. I am using two different gammas for this for a variety of reasons. If anybody's a camera nerd and you spot that the shirt is grey, but everything else looks fine, and the shirt is blue, don't shoot the messenger, right? We're working on it. Anyway, listen, let's say some quick hellos, but before we do, I want to remind you that today's stream is, of course, brought to you by licklibrary.com and guitarinteractivemagazine.com. You can go to Lick Library for all of your lesson needs, Guitar Interactive for news, reviews, all that good non-lesson related stuff. Any that's not a lesson, you can go there. I also want to take a quick second and show you, if I can find the thing, our featured course for today, because of course we do have a featured course. It is this guy. This is an absolute gem of a course by our man Rich Shaw, who hasn't received anywhere near enough love on this series of streams. I'm just going to close down that advert before I show you. This is a really cool new course. You can go and check this out if you are a Lick Library member. If you're not a Lick Library member, I would encourage you to go and check this out at your leisure, because it is really, really worth your time. Now, this is Rich Shaw's Scales for Rock and Metal Guitar. Let me just make myself tiny in the corner here if I can. There we go. Can we do that? That's a good one. Okay, yeah, Scales for Rock and Metal Guitar. What this gives you is it gives you a guide on how to use all of these cool, interesting sounding, and very, very useful scales with context as well. Look at this, down here, Phrygian dominant scale with a Middle Eastern and symphonic vibe. Its dominant quality and exotic flavor are perfect for lead lines that sound epic and unconventional. So a really good course if you want a little bit of a primer or a bit of a brush up on scales that you can use in your rock and metal playing. Go check that out. It is 100% worth your time, right? It's Rich Shaw's Scales for Rock and Metal. You will find that in your Lick Library membership if you're a Lick Library member. If you're not a Lick Library member, maybe today is the day. Maybe today is the day where you think about signing up. There's so many great lessons. It is 100% worth your time. So anyway, let's say some hellos and then we'll get stuck into today's stream. We're going to begin with Sacred Godslayer, who's the first one here, followed by PJ and Marcin and Foghornish. Larry Warren's here, Helmet Straps here. Response Audio is asking if we're having a good Monday. I am always having good Mondays, right? When it gets to 8 o'clock on the Monday, it's always a good time. Always happy to be here. Our friend Neckaneck12 says, good evening to Nick and others. Thanks for coming on board, man. It's great to have you. Kate Strange is here playing a Jackson Flying V. Super cool. Kim the Big Boss is tuning in from, I think, our London studio, unless he's somewhere fancy. Who knows? Last time we did this, we dashed off and got Nando's after the stream. It was really good fun. And now I'm craving Nando's, so maybe that's in my future. We've got another one. Our friend Nobski, or Nobsky, says, oi oi, how's it going, everyone? It's going good, man. It's going good. Steve Louth says, evening, Nick and gang. Good to have you. Johnny Nine Fingers is here. Mark Manish is here. We got some love for a Steve Lukather Ibanez. Super cool. Cranker Tom's here. Nick Harrison's here. By the way, if you're not sharing your guitar with us, let us know what guitar you're playing today, because we like to talk about guitars. We like guitars. Guitars are cool, right? I want to know what guitars you're playing, because guitars are fun. We like guitars. guitars. Mike Seedorf is here. Great to have you. Lovely compliment. Thank you very much, man. I really appreciate that. Kathmandu 1962 is playing an Ibanez S740. Very cool, right? Loved those when I was a kid. They were like the new hotness with the S's, born of the Sabre series, if I'm not mistaken, because they look a bit like a saber because they're all thin. Very cool. Block 18 is tuning in with some numbers at the end of his name. Says, hey guitar friends, hope everyone is well. He just took delivery of his new Baum Wingman. I nearly played my Baum Backwing today. Now, we were nearly matchy-matchy. You know what? Like, I'm going to play the Backwing because we've got a Baum in the chat, so I'm going to Baum it up too, right? If you're playing the, your Wingman, I'll play my Backwing. Why not? What a cool guitar. If you guys aren't familiar with the wonderful, wonderful folks over at Baum Guitars, man, just so friggin' good, right? Check it out. This is my Baum Backwing. It is it's a Backwing I've got. It's not the Wingman. So the Wingman is not quite a reverse Backwing. It's its own thing. Super cool guitars and lovely guys as well. Really, really nice lads. Great company. I love the way that they're doing business with this whole like direct customer, but also kind of like pre-order, paying installments kind of deal. Super cool, right? I think it's great. Some people are quite cynical about it. I bought this guitar in that fashion. I'm glad I did. Anyway, some more comments. Thunderwings 1955 is tuning in from the Wirral. Great to see you. We've got some nice guitars. I agree. Vil S is in the house. Sacred Godslayer has finally received his Ibanez. What is this? The RG with the low, oh, fantastic, so cool, right, so cool. One of the guitars that Alex Skolnick played in the late 80s. I know exactly which one you're talking about, where it's kind of like, it's not quite a reverse body RG, but it's super cool. Friend Craig is in the house, great to see you. Our friend Dreams is in here. I'm guessing, I think that gamer tag has changed. Says, hey guys, hey Nick, his band's finally released their first song. It's called Remedy by Still Ember. I'm going to encourage you, all of our viewers, to go and check this out, because this is something we do here. We go and support each other's music. So if you got music that you're releasing, come and chat about it on the stream, right? I'll go and check that out after the fact, but I'm going to encourage you guys to go and check that out. That is Remedy by Still Ember. Get that in your notes app if you haven't done so already, because you're going to want to check that out after the stream. That is super cool. Mike Seedorf's playing an Andy James Kiesel. That is some guitar, let me tell you, right? That's a race car of a guitar. Who else do we have very quickly? We've got a Harley Benton Lawsuit Explorer. I love it. Very cool. An Ibanez JS1000. Lots of Ibanez love today. Love a bit of that. Justin Ray's in the house. With some confusion over daylight saving. Tell me about it, man. Always confuses me too. We got a 72 custom-made green Strat. Love to see that. Gorgeous. Very cool. Is there anyone I've missed? Peter Montague is tuning in. He's too tired to play the guitar. Don't you worry, man. My friend Ant is in the house for some sausage-related chat. Good evening, beautiful man. Right back at you, you beautiful boy. Is the Kraken back? I hear a lot of lovely hum. The Kraken is in fact back. It's always humming away to itself because I've got the gain cranked up. But yes, the Kraken is back. It is no longer poorly. It's sounding pretty hot, I think. It's a good one. We got a gem. I'm going to quickly get through as many of these as we can. Steve Echo's guitar. Great to see you tuning in from Bedfordshire. Nick Harrison is playing his ubiquitous Storm Shadow DBS. A very cool guitar. If you're not familiar, very cool. Ant's playing his new Unicorn Strat. Love a bit of that. A Hayden Williams Mojo guitar. Interesting. That's not one I'm familiar with. I'm going to check that out. 1984 Strat. That's a good year. That's the year I was born. Show my age there. Old man that I am. We've got a Gibson ES339. Super cool. An HSS Strat. I think that's all the guitars, apart from Craig's Pink Eastwood Telly. Love a bit of that, right? Why would you not want a pink Telly? So cool. Anyway, let's get about it. So we're going to begin by proposing a few ways that we might examine playing in key, because this is not, it's a funny thing, right? It's a funny thing. I get this question all the time from folks, and we get the question all the time. How do I know what key I'm supposed to be playing in? How do I know what scales I'm supposed to be using if someone doesn't tell me? So you're probably all familiar with this process where you will load up a backing track. Let's say you load up a backing track, and the backing track will say D Dorian backing track, and you'll go, okay, I know my D Dorian scale, that's great. Now what? Now what? Well, there's a process we can go through, right? If you don't know what the backing track is in, or we don't know what the song is in, we can go through a process of figuring this out. And we're going to start with a process of figuring out the key of the chord progression that we're playing in. And for this, we're going to need a little bit of information on our parent major scale. Right, so this is one of the few times you'll hear me promote parental thinking when it comes to modes, because we're going to get into modes too. Again, controversial topics. Some folks will say that modes cannot be keys. Those folks, in my opinion, are wrong. But that's fine. That's okay. They're not wrong. It's a different perspective. But for me, hey, that's a debate I'll weigh into any time. So, quickly switching to a clean sound, let's take a look at a hypothetical chord progression. Our hypothetical chord progression may be this. We may have the chords. Let's go to the close-up cam, get a good look at this lovely gold guitar. I think I just need to do the white balance on my main camera. I think that's the problem here. Anyway, hypothetical chord progression. Hypothetically, we may have a chord progression that runs G, A minor, C, E minor, G, A minor, C, E minor. A fun chord progression, I'm sure you'll agree. G, A minor, C, E minor. I have chosen this chord progression for a reason, because what I want to know from you guys is what key you think this is in. G, A minor, C, E minor. Quite a fun little progression, a nice one to play over. You could write a song with that, I'm sure. It's not the 4 chords of the Apocalypse. If you have missed our lessons on the 4 chords of the Apocalypse, go get those. You guys are all correctly, I would say, responding with G major, for sure. How do we get to that conclusion? Because there's a few things it could have been here. Could have been G, it could have been C. It could have been, there's lots of keys it could have been, right? I've chosen these for reasons. Could have been C, because all those chords are in C. It could have been A minor. It could have been E minor. It could have been all of those progressions. Let's get into why. So, okay, chords in a major scale. Very quickly, we have the following. If we start on our root note, we get the following chords. We have access to, starting in G, let's say, a major chord on chord 1, or note 1, a minor chord on note 2, a minor chord on note 3, a major chord on note 4, a major chord on note 5, a minor chord on note 6, and a diminished chord on note 7. We can extrapolate those out to their sevenths. We can make it major 7, minor 7, minor 7, major 7, dominant 7, minor 7, half diminished. Either way, that's our harmonized major scale. Now this in the key of G would give us the following. G, that's chord 1, A minor, that's chord 2, C, major, that's chord 3, E minor, chord 6. We could call this a 1, 2, 4, 6 chord progression. What if it was C? Well, what do we get? C could be chord 1, which would give us G being from C, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, chord 5. Major chord, checks out. We can have A minor, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, oops, sharp 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. A minor, checks out. So it could be 5, 6, 1, 3. The reason I've chosen this chord progression is for that reason. This could be intellectualized as being in C. It could be intellectualized as being in G. It is very obviously in G. Why is it very obviously in G? Because, as our friend Craig has rightly pointed out, G is the home chord. But why? But why? Why is it the home chord? Well, we're going to get to that in a second, right? It's important stuff, but it is in fact in G. It is in fact in G. We've got some cool analogies we're going to talk about in a second, but this is the reason I chose this specific progression. Let's flip it halfway through. Let's start with C, and let's do C, E minor, G, A minor, and see what that gives us. And for this, I'll play a little melody in C to set us up. So now we have the palette for C. Let's play that same chord progression, starting on the C. C, E minor. You feel me? G, A minor. C, E minor. G, A minor. It's not a very effective chord progression. It's kind of a bit weird and disjointed, but it could conceivably be in C. It could conceivably be an A minor. What if we started it on A minor? Here's a little A minor melody. Let's go. A minor, C, E minor, G, A minor, C, E minor, G, A minor, C, E minor, G. You get the gist, right? It could also be an E minor. Now, this highlights an interesting problem here. This highlights a very interesting problem in that we occasionally bump into chord progressions that do not neatly fit into a single, or they either don't neatly fit into a single key, or they neatly fit into many keys, which is where we need to start making some distinctions. We have the G, in this instance being the G was the home chord. Why? Because I spent a lot of time just playing G before we played that chord progression. If I played in G, and then play my progression, we kind of hear it as G. Why? Because we're imagining melodies in our head that's in G, which leads us to another problem here, right? I'm posing problems. Here is another chord progression for you. Another chord progression is going to be this. The progression will be D, C, G. Let me just run that again. D, C, G. I'm sure you've heard that 1,000 times. D, C, G. It's in G, right? It's in G. Or is it? Or is it in D something else, right? It's one hell of a headstock. It is, in fact, one hell of a headstock. Let's examine this chord progression we just played. This D, C, G. D, C, G. There are two songs that use this chord progression in the same rhythm. In the same rhythm, right? It could be in D, it could be in G. We can hear it a whole bunch of different ways. Stadium God Slayer with a great observation. We're going to get to that in a second. Okay, here we go. This is either Sweet Home Alabama or it's Werewolves of London. Same chord progression. Literally the same rhythm, right? Copyright strike granted, you got it, for sure, right? It is the same chord progression. The same chord progression. Here's an interesting one though. Sweet Home Alabama is in D, and Werewolves of London is in G. But it's the same chords. Help. How do we know? Well, melodies. Melodies can help. So this is all about learning and developing a sense for our home chord. What is the home chord and how do we develop a sense for it? Well, the home chord begins with us acknowledging how the root note feels and functions in a given track. And this requires us to start paying attention in our improvisation, right? When we play our improvisations, we're not just playing scales blindly. We are paying attention to the functions of the notes they play. We talked about this lots on these streams, paying attention to how a root note feels versus the way all of the other notes feel and all the notes that aren't in the progression feel. Here's one in the key of C sharp. Let me just play some C sharp notes so we can get some feel for that resolution, that lovely resolved. Root note action. Let's take a listen real quick. A classic backing track of mine, I think. There's some C sharp. We can hear how well resolved that is. That feels like a real solid place to be. It's nice. That's the fifth. Is it as resolved? Not so much. So this one is very obviously in C sharp minor, right? That is very clearly the root note. Now, it could be C sharp anything if all we use the root note, but we'll go deducing properly in a second. Let's go back to our problem of Werewolves of London and Sweet Home Alabama, both with the same chords, both in different keys. Well, let's begin with Sweet Home Alabama and the melody for Sweet Home Alabama. We all know the melody for Sweet Home Alabama. We're going to say, I'm going to get you to sing in your head for this one. I'm not going to sing because we will get some copyright strikes, I'm sure. We'll not, but even still. Sweet Home Alabama, watch this. What's this? That note. That note is D. That is very clearly our melody note. Let's play it with some funky tapping stuff going on so we can hear it. I'll go. Let's maybe get some compression on so we can hear that. Stanley Jordan plays Sweet Home Alabama badly. That's the root note. Excuse the terrible tapping. That is not really. This whole 8-finger tapping thing is not really my forte, but I'll have a go. Werewolves of London, same thing. So the melody here is. It's only G's. That is very clearly the G, very clearly the root. So very clearly, these melodies are guiding us to the center of our chord progression, the root, the center of resolution, the center of tonal gravity. I'm misusing that term, I know, but it's definitely something worth paying attention to. Now, how do we find this? How do we find this? Well, what we can do is we can play the tonic, the root note, not tonic, rather, I digress. We can play the, I don't digress, I say the wrong thing is what I say. We can play the note of each one of the chords one at a time and see which one feels like a lovely melodic resolution to us. Let's do the same thing with our G chord progression. That wasn't the key of G. I'll go digging for these, and I'll just play the root notes of each chord. And I'm going to play the C over the top of each one. Let's go like this. Oh, again. Ugh, gross. I'm not saying the root note will always work. But pretty grim. Let's try it with a G. Aha! We have some strong resolution. So we can be fairly well confident, based on this, that our chord progression is in the key of G. Why? Not because we had some bias towards G or any of that sort of stuff, or because it was the first chord or the last chord or any of that stuff, but because the G feels like the home note. It feels like the sender. This is useful because now we have something to work from. We can work from the fact that our chord progression is in G something. G something. How do we know? Because G is very clearly the root. Very clearly the root. It feels strong and resolved to us. If we're playing off that chord progression, we would know what to do with that. Now, from here, what we do is we start to take stock of the notes that are in our chords, and we see if there's one convenient scale that we can map our chords to. There may not be. and often there isn't, but we'll pay attention to that too. So if there's one convenient scale that we can map our chords to, we'll start there. So let's take a look at the notes that are in our chords, and we'll keep stock of this. And what I'm going to do is I'll do this with a banner on the screen. So let's start with G. What do we have? We have in our G chord the following. We have, come on keyboard, don't let me down now, G, a B, and a D. Cool, right, there's our G, B, D. What about the notes that are in our A minor? We have an A, a C, and an E. So let's edit that up. What do we got? We got G, A, B, C, D, and E. This is already starting to look like a fleshed out scale. I also want to quickly highlight this comment from our friend Sacred Godslayer, who was in with this ahead of time. Gotta ask the bass boy if he plays an F or an F sharp. My bass player Anna is absolutely in charge of this stuff, let me tell you. And she's also the highest vocal in the band, so she basically sits on the bottom and the top. And like whatever we do in the middle, she gets to pick. She's like, this C's feeling pretty like an A minor 7 to me, and I feel like I'm gonna stick the 9 on the top. Like, ugh, cool, great. Guess you're in charge, and that's fine. I trust it. So anyway, there are notes in here. What about the notes in C? Well, we've got a C, we've got an E, we've got a G. Any new information? Nope. What about this? G. We've got an E, we've got a G, we've got a B. Cool. So these notes kind of cover everything. This gives us, in the key of G, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and what I'm going to call Schrodinger's 7, because there is no 7 right now. This means our chord progression could currently be in 1 or 2 potential keys. It could be that it's Mixolydian with an F, or it could be that it's Ionian with an F sharp, i.e. G major. Here's an important thing that I want to show you and I want to share with you on this. This is a thought experiment, but it's also something that is very valuable when it comes to this sort of stuff. If there are 2 potential keys that this could be in, we generally choose the one that is most common. Generally choose the one that is most common, unless you're trying to do something. You know that, what's that sketch where the guy's like, I'm trying to do something, and he goes through the drive-through and like orders a load of food or something. I can't remember. But unless you're trying to do something, we assume the one that's most common, or we assume the one that is most obvious. This is where we had the G-C debate before. Again, important because the G-C thing, you go, well, it could be in C, it's in G. We all know it's in G. It's in G. I'm going to share with you an analogy on this, which is the following. I want you to imagine that you are in the place where you live. You're in your home. You have come home from work or study or whatever it is that you do through the day. You've come home and you're preparing to step out for the evening. Maybe you're going to meet some friends. Maybe you're going to a gig, whatever. You open your window because it's unseasonably warm and you hear hooves from outside your window. You should assume that it is a horse. Depending on where you live, you're probably going to assume it's a horse. You'll probably listen to that and go, oh, listen, a horse. You probably won't go, oh, listen, a zebra. See where I'm going with this? Right, we don't necessarily, I live in the northeast of England, we don't get many zebras around here, right? If I heard hooves outside my window, I would be right to assume it's a horse, right? Unless I looked out and I saw stripes and went, well, would you look at that? It's a zebra. This is where we're getting at with this stuff, right? If we don't have all the information, we can make some assumptions, and the assumptions we can make are based on conventions. We hear songs in the major scale a lot more than we hear songs in the Mixolydian mode. So we can assume that this chord progression is in G major, even though there is no F sharp or F to tell us definitively one way or another. We can just make this assumption. We can go, it's probably highly likely going to be G major. Highly likely. So let's test that theory by playing some F sharps and some Fs over the top of these chords and just see what they do. So what I'll do with this, I'll play a little ostinato. Let me find a slightly more compressed, clean sound, if I can find one. And maybe I'll just throw my compressor on. We've got some questions about the amp tones tonight. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Having some fun with the amp tones. Maybe that's the right choice, maybe it's the wrong choice. I know where I'll go for this. I've got too many amps, I'm spoiled. That's our one. Okay, so let's go listening and let's see which one feels the most natural. Here we go. So this is with major thirds, major sevenths. You hear me? Let's go again. That feels pretty good. I've got to highlight this one. That is pretty sad. Cognitive bias against zebras. For sure. I did say it depends where you live, right? I did say it depends where you live, right? If you live in the northeast of England, probably not many zebras. If you live in the Serengeti, you may feel differently, right? 100% agree. Absolutely agree. If you live in pre-colonial America, you definitely won't think horse. That's for sure. Maybe you'll think it's a goat. Who knows? But for me, horse, right? I don't know. I just, I'm speaking for myself here, but it's just to illustrate a point. So anyway, let's go back to that. That's with our major 7. Let's do the same thing, but this time with a minor 7 to imply mixed Lydian. Which would give us this. It kind of works, but that just feels very, very natural. Now, of course, there is a dealer's choice at play here. You could choose to buck the trends. You could choose to buck the trends and just go with whatever, but that's absolutely fine if that's your call. But this little process of deduction is the way that we do this. We find which note is the one with the strongest gravity, the one that feels like the key, for want of a better term, the key. And then from there, we stretch out and we go, okay, now we found the key, let's look at the notes that are in our chord progression and let's move from there. Now, what if we have a chord that does not necessarily fit with the others? What if we had this chord progression? G, A major, C, E minor. It's still in G. Point 6 is there for some reason. Right? What's going on here? Well, let's take a look at that A major that we're playing real quick. A major is containing this note. This note being a C sharp. Let's look at our little pool of notes that we've collected there. I see no C sharp here. That was a tongue twister. I see no C sharp here. There is no C sharp in the pool of notes that we're playing here, right? Does that make sense? Well, what do we have to do here? Do we correct our pool of notes to go, well, wait a minute, now it includes a C sharp. What happens when we go back to the C chord? Well, now we got problems. Now we got problems. And this is where we bump up against the very common non-diatonic chord progression. It is a chord progression that does not neatly map to a diatonic scale. Diatonic being a single major scale that we can play along with, right? My buddy John tuning in, he has got the key. He has in fact got the secret. So non-diatonic chord progressions are an interesting beast because what we have to do is we have to acknowledge where most of the chords are coming from. And in this case, most of the chords are coming from G major. One of the chords is not. And in this instance, that chord is A. What do we do in this case? We got a few options. We can do a few things here. We can either correct our scale to map to the new chord, or we treat the chord like an island and play something completely different over the top of it and then snap back into our scale when it's time. There are a few a few times when you'd use one or two other. We got some mentions of jazz in the comments. Serious question, very quickly. When does the jazz player maxim fall amongst these? If you play it, if you play it once, it's wrong. If you repeat it, it's the right note. This is the repetition legitimizes thing. I would probably go even so far as to say that if you play it with good time, it's probably fine. There are some examples of some pretty sour notes in famous recordings that aren't either right or aren't necessarily even in tune, but because they're played with conviction and good time, you're going to get away with it. However, that is not what we're trying to teach people how to do today, but it's a really interesting point, man, and I'm glad you made it. I'm glad you brought this to our attention. Here's a good one from Nick Harrison, a great comment saying, with jazz, one wrong note was a mistake, twice is intentional, 3 times it's a style. For sure, 100%, right? 100%. I'm totally with you, right? So we're taking the mick out of jazz players. We don't mean to, but quite funny. So, anyway. On non-diatonic chords, we could take a look at this. We're assuming we're in G major. We could do the path of least resistance to find these chords. So we could take, I'm just going to quickly throw an F sharp in here for argument's sake. There's my F sharp. We could take this scale that we've agreed upon, which is our G major scale, and we could edit it for this one chord to have the following. We could go, okay, it's got a C sharp in just this one chord. Let's just quickly adapt that. So now we get this. Anyone know what this scale is? Right, it's G major with the 1, 2, 3, 4th note sharpened. Major scale with a sharp 4, anyone? It's the Lydian scale. We've got some answers in already. You guys are in there, right? You're in there. We got some Lydian answers. It's the Lydian scale. So what we could do is we could take this chord, this A major, as being a momentary dip into the appropriate Lydian scale. The Lydian scale being G Lydian in this case. Why? Because it's as little movement as we can get away with making, right? We have to adapt just one of the notes. We adapt this one note. We've moved as few parts. When we get here, we snap straight back to our major scale. So we can play this. That's one way of adapting to these chord progressions. Other things we could do, however, is we can also start to take a look at chords as islands. Now, this is a very fusion, not fusion-centric, it's a very fusion strategy for doing this stuff, which is useful and interesting, and definitely something you should be aware of, because there are some common guidelines for surviving chord changes. Let's say playing chord changes that are maybe not necessarily related to each other. And we have the following. For this, we need to know, or at least be able to assume, the 7th value of a given chord. The 7th value of a given chord. What I mean by that is it major 7? Is it dominant 7? Is it minor 7? Is it minor 7 flat 5? Is it dominant 7 altered? Is it diminished 7th? All these sort of things. We covered all this in our chord construction streams, but let's stick with some very obvious options. Now, if we were to take the idea that this A is a dominant 7 chord, we'll get into why. It could be a dominant 7, it could be a major 7. Let's talk about why it could be. So it's a major chord. The 7th is unrevealed to us at this point. Unrevealed to us. We haven't picked a 7th. Why would this be a dominant chord and not a major 7 chord? I want to ask the chat this, right? Let me know, because this is an interesting dilemma. And we need to do different things depending upon which chord we're playing, right? But while we do this, tell me why this A, in this context, we would hear it as dominant 7 and not as major 7. While we do this, let me explain the scale choices that we use over each of these scale types. And for this, I'll choose an E flat, so it's completely unrelated. If we hear a major 7 chord, unless it's a tonic, if we hear it very obviously as a tonic, we can play the major scale. If we hear it as something other than a tonic, we play Lydian. So if I play C major, E flat major, they're not related to each other, we don't know which one's a tonic, they're both Lydian. If we hear dominant chords, E flat 7, we have two choices. We can play mixed Lydian, or we can play Lydian dominant. Very cool sounding scale. Sometimes Lydian dominant is hipper. Mixed Lydian is quite easy to deal with, however. If we have a minor 7 chord, we assume it's Dorian. I hasten to add that these chords are for, or these strategies of Lydian over a major 7 chord, mixed Lydian or Lydian dominant over a dominant chord, and Dorian over a minor 7 chord, are strategies that we use when these chords are not part of a bigger key, when there's something that is a diversion from a bigger key. These are the strategies we use. But let's go back, because nobody's got it yet, right? Let's go back to why this A would be a dominant chord and not a major 7 chord. What note would the 7 be? Let's talk about it, right? What note would the 7 be if we played a major 7 chord? A major 7, the 7th would be G sharp. If it was a dominant 7, the flat 7 would be G. Let's have a look at what key we're in. G, that G is in our minds. It's part of our pool. If we play this A, it makes sense that we extend it with notes that are already in our pool. So that's why we'd hear this as a dominant 7 and not a major 7. This is a cool trick for decoding whether a rogue major chord, a major chord that is unrelated to our other chords, one that is not connected to the rest of the key. I'm doing F for a reason. Boys are back in town. I'm looking at you. Whether it would be a dominant chord or whether it be a major 7 chord. If we don't have information on what the 7th is, the cheeky and easy way to do this is just to look at what note the various 7s are and find out which one of those is most likely to be in our parent key. So if we take the example of Boys Are Back in Town, it has this fantastic F major chord that crops up out of nowhere. I guess we need some kind of Marshall sound for this because we might do this. This is the key of A, by the way. A major. F. Wow. Is this going to be a major 7 chord or a dominant 7 chord? Let's look at the context. It's zebras and horses all over again. Let's look at the context. It could be either. It could be either because, well, we don't know. We just don't know if it's major. We don't know if it's major 7 or dominant 7. What's the possibilities? In a major 7, we have an E, and that's in the key. Oh. If we have the dominant 7, whoa, now we're dealing with some spice. Oftentimes, you'll just know by playing the chord, but if you don't get the chance to play the chord, you can make these deductions. You can go, okay, look, that chord is like major something. Do I play mixed Lydian or do I play Lydian? Is it major 7? Is it dominant 7? Well, let's look at what's in the key. Minor chords are really easy to deal with because you just go Dorian, unless there's something in there to tell you otherwise. But major chords tend to trip people. So in this instance, it would be, for our rogue major chord, some Lydian. But in the case of our rogue major chord in the chord progression that we've concocted, we established that the major 7 is not in the key, but the dominant 7 is. So we go dominant chord, which means what? It means we play mixed Lydian. Snap back into the key. Now, let's look at the notes that are in that mixed Lydian scale. What are they? These ones. So this A Lydian, sorry, this A mixed Lydian, could be A mixed Lydian. We could play G Lydian and get the same result. The same result. This is to point to you that both roads lead to Rome here. This idea of treating the chord as an island, or taking the totality of the notes that are in our chord progression and making the minimal number of adjustments will get us there. Does that make sense? Hopefully that does, right? Hopefully that does. Here we go. Isn't F a modal interchange? So play a minor scale, play A minor. In this instance, yes. But what is A minor and F Lydian but the same notes? Same notes. If we got an E flat, different story, right? So if we were playing in Boys Are Back in Town and we got an E flat out there, this sounds weird because we're so used to the chord progression. But yes, you're right. It is a modal interchange in this case, but it produces the same result. This is the point I'm getting at here, is it doesn't always produce the same result, but it often does. It often just leads you to the point you were going to be getting at anyway. So yeah, great observation though. Really good observation. And I'm glad you brought that up because it's a very good point. So anyway, real quick, let's just talk about what happens if we got a rogue E flat chord instead of the instead of the F chord. What do we do over that? Wow, well that's an interesting one. So it's major, it could be dominant, it could be major 7, it could be either of those. What do we do? Well, we look at whether the 7th would be in key, or at least in keeping with the key, if it was here, or it was here. This is a tricky one. It can actually be either, because that is, in this case, that is the 4th of our home key. That's the major 3rd. In this case, I'm going to assume it's the 4th, but actually either would work. It's kind of a strange case where both would fly. The reason I would probably assume that is because that is the next available scale degree. That is crossing us into another scale degree. Semitones are complicated, folks. But what we might get is this. Hopefully you follow the gist on that. Now, that is a very complicated treatise on finding the scales that you should play over a given chord progression, but I think it's reasonably comprehensive because I wanted to get through as much of this as possible for you guys so you have a toolkit for doing this stuff. Now, is it as instantaneous as some folks are able to do this? No, but here's the thing. The more you practice this, the more you do this, the quicker it becomes. And you will hear certain chords and recognize what they are and go, oh, I know what that is. I'll just play over that. That's fine. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm sure you have questions, so we're going to take some, right? We'll take as many questions as we possibly can. We've got some really good observations here. Here's one from Simon 3 Hodges. Saying, Gary Moore, the last phrase in the Out in the Field solo includes the major 3rd of A, and he maps out the triads. Class act. For sure. Gary was a really clever player, like way cleverer than people necessarily give. I've hit the cough button and I've uncoughed myself. That was a huge big treatise. Sorry guys. I hit the cough button and failed to uncough myself. Well done me. What a pro. Apparently not. Let me just say that again. So with regards to Gary Moore. So Gary did not get the credit that he was due, I don't think, for being a smart and educated player, right? Educated player. Can you guys hear me now? Hear me now. Yes, for Gary being a smart and educated player, I don't think he got the credit that he was due. I'm sorry if any of you, like Mahal Brady, were doubting your speakers. It was me. I coughed and I forgot to uncough. I apologize. But anyway, yeah, Gary didn't get credit he was due. Real smart guy. For all... we associate Gary with those lovely blues ballads and with the big aggressive rock stuff, like Out in the Fields. Let's not forget that Gary also did a load of straight fusion stuff in like Colosseum 2. I don't want to say that there was maybe some bias against a self-taught player, or maybe some classism at play because of the time that Gary was coming up. I don't want to wade into politics, but there was definitely some stuff going on where Gary did not get the credit for being quite as intelligent of a player as he was. But a really good example of this is the triads in Shapes of Things, which for me, the Gary Moore version is the definitive version. Sorry, Yardbirds. I know it's your song, but I think that is the best one, I think. Here's a cool observation from our friend Nick Harrison, a very good one, saying, if you're playing the diatonic key, there are 5 borrowed chords that can be used, which could be major, minor, diminished, or augmented, and you can think about playing over them as a question of a journey throughout the harmonic language. Through the harmonic language, a very cool observation. Totally agree. And there are conventions with borrowed chords as well. There are conventions that we tend to hear. Let me give you another example of this, right? Let me give you another example. We're playing an E minor, let's say. We're playing an E minor chord progression. For this, we'll maybe go to a rock sound of some stripe, and we get the following. We get... I'm going to play this for you again, tell you what they are. E minor, C, A major, D. We can recognize that in E minor, the key of E minor, the natural minor scale, the E's, C's, and D's are all in. It's the Megadeth progression. It absolutely is the Megadeth progression. I even have a Megadeth backing track to demonstrate this too, which I have labeled Modal Thrash, which is this. Check it out. I'll just chug along this side. With an F chord for good measure. If anybody wants a little bit of modal interchange in their metal backing tracks, that's available on the Lick Library website. Anyway, this A chord is the fly in the ointment here because we're playing from the E minor hymn book, which is the notes derived from G major. You can think about it that way. We've got a C sharp in our A. What we could do is we could treat that as an entirely new chord progression. An entirely new chord. We could treat it as an island. We could also look at the other scales that it could come from. It's just an A chord all on its lonesome. It could be A major. It could come from A major. It could be major 7. That might work. It could be A Lydian. It could be all sorts of scales. But it's not. It's E Dorian. Why is it E Dorian? Because we're moving as few pieces as we possibly can, right? As few pieces we can move, we're going to move those. Let me show you this over this backing track, right? When it gets to the A, I'm going to play some of the scales that are a bit weird and wonderful on this. I once had a discussion with a fusion player about this, actually, funnily enough. A fusion player, and we're talking about playing over this chord progression, which we talked about as the Batman chord progression, which is A major. In this case, A major without a 7. It's A major add 9. And this chord, which is D minor add 9. And our fusion friend said, quite rightly, well, that's A Lydian. And this is D Dorian. For me, rock player, I was looking for one common key. I wanted to move as little stuff as I could, and I went, well, there's a scale that maps to both of these. and it's the scale that I often incorrectly, but still obstinately refer to as a Aeolian dominant. You may know it as Mixed Lydian Flat 6. I learned it in Joe Satriani's Guitar Secrets, and it sounds Aeolian to me. Doesn't sound very Mixed Lydian at all. Both work. Mine is horses, his was zebras, I think. Zebras are fine. If you're going for zebras, if you're trying to do something, go with it. If you're trying to move less stuff, don't. Anyway, here's the Megadeth chord progression with some solo tones. From the Super Kraken, we had questions about the amp setup. You know what, I'm going to quickly highlight that as well because it's an excuse for me to talk about my amps. Amps are friggin' cool. From our friend Block 18, we'll get to that. Okay, so let's play all the wrong ones. Let's take this, let's do the right one first, right? So we're going to get E minor with E Dorian over the A. Let's do it again, but this time I'm going to play A major over the A chord. Did it work? Kinda. Did it work as well? Not so much. What about a Lydian? Yes, it's fun. Is it a bit... they all kind of work, to be honest. They're all kind of fine. But for me, moving the fewest parts, it's the rock way to do things, I think. So anyway, folks, a long and fairly detailed treatise on finding the right key. Long question, too long to answer. We'll have another one. We'll have another one now. Aren't we just playing the brightest available scale? Ooh, interesting question. Next stream, we'll talk about that. But I do want to quickly highlight this. What are the amps? Thanks, man. Appreciate the sound. Appreciate the sound. What am I talking about? Appreciate the compliment. That's really kind of you. Yeah, cool sounds tonight. Let me show you what's going on. The lead sound is, of course, the Super Kraken. The Super Kraken now has EL34s, whereas previously had a 6L6s. And because of this, I've now switched on the bass focus mode to lean into the tight low end, and I've turned the low end up a little bit on the actual amp's controls. So it's a bit snugger in the lows, a bit smoother in the highs. I was wondering why my chops are a little off tonight. It's because I've literally just come from the gym and I am currently, what's the word, retraining my hook grip, which is a very painful way of gripping a barbell. So my hands are a bit of a mess, and also I forgot to cut my fingernails. Getting those excuses in. Anyway, so that's that. The clean sounds we chose: PRS Archon, Victory Super Jack. How different are they? Not very. This one's a bit more posh Fender. This one's a bit more mid-range focused. And then the Marshall tone we had was PRS HDRX 20. And the big Marshall tone was Victory Super Sheriff. And here's the Super Kraken again. Still the favourite lead tone. I'm happy it's back. But yeah, the EL34s, it works a treat in the Super. It's less aggressive for the metal stuff, but I've got my Archon for that, and I can use a more aggressive cab. Anyway, folks, been a lot of fun. I'm going to play out on the Megadeth track, because it's kind of cool. This is the wrong guitar to play it on, and these are the wrong hands to play it on today, but who cares? We're going to have some fun. I will see you guys same time next week.